I can see the sound of monitors before I hear it. That's how deep it goes. 15 years in emergency medicine teaches you to read a room by its machines, to know when the beeping changes pitch, when silence is worse than alarms. But that night, the night everything stopped working, the silence came first, then the screaming, then the counting. 12. I still count them sometimes, in line at the pharmacy, waiting for the bus, standing in my kitchen with a mug of coffee going cold in my hands. 1 through 12. Names I promised myself I'd never forget. Faces that blur together now into a single expression of fear and confusion, and the terrible question, why aren't you saving me? My name is Helena Correa. I'm 42 years old. I was a critical care nurse for 18 years. Was, past tense. The kind of tense that sits heavy in your chest like a stone you swallowed whole and can't quite cough up. I work at a community health clinic now, taking blood pressure readings and filling out forms. It's quiet, safe. No one dies when you're checking if their insurance covers a flu shot. People ask why I left the hospital. I tell them burnout, which is true, but it's the kind of truth that covers a bigger, uglier truth underneath. Like a bandage over a wound that never quite healed right, the edges puckered and tender, refusing to close. It was March 14th, a Tuesday. I remember because I'd promised my daughter I'd be home for her birthday on Wednesday, that I'd make her favorite bolo de chocolate, that we'd watch that movie she'd been asking about for weeks. I remember thinking, just one more shift. One more night, and then 3 days off. I could make it through one more night. The storm had been building all day. By the time my shift started at 7 p.m., the wind was already rattling the windows of the ICU. Rain coming down so hard it sounded like gravel hitting the glass. São Paulo gets storms, but this one had a different quality. Angry, relentless. The kind of weather that makes you grateful you're inside, until you're not. We had 14 patients in a 12-bed unit. Standard overflow for a Tuesday night. 3 on ventilators, 4 post-surgical, the rest critical but stable. The hospital had been struggling with budget cuts for months. Equipment that should have been replaced wasn't. Staff that should have been hired weren't. We made do. That's what you do in public health care. You make do until making do stops being enough. The power went out at 9:47 p.m. I know the exact time because I was charting when the lights cut out, and my pen froze mid-word on the paper. For exactly 3 seconds, there was complete darkness. Complete silence. Then the emergency generators kicked in, and the backup lights came on. That sickly yellow glow that makes everyone look half dead already. The monitors rebooted. The ventilators switched to battery power. We thought we were fine. We thought the generators would hold. They didn't. At 10:03, we lost power again. This time, the generators didn't restart. This time, we were in darkness with 14 critical patients. 3 of them unable to breathe on their own, and the storm outside howling like something alive and furious. The backup batteries on the ventilators gave us maybe 45 minutes. Maybe. I can still feel the weight of the manual resuscitator bag in my hands. The rhythm you have to maintain. Squeeze, release, squeeze, release. Breathe for them because the machine can't. Because the power is out, and the generators are dead, and the maintenance crew is somewhere in the basement, trying to fix something that can't be fixed fast enough. There were 4 of us on duty that night. 4 nurses for 14 patients when 3 of them needed constant manual ventilation and the others needed monitoring we couldn't do without power. No lights except our phone flashlights. No monitors except our own hands on pulses, our own eyes watching chest movements. No call buttons. No way to know who was crashing until we physically went to their bedside and checked. You have to understand. We tried. We tried everything. We ran between beds, manually bagging the ventilator patients in rotation, checking vitals by touch and instinct. We called for help, but the whole hospital was in crisis mode. The ER was flooded, literally flooded, water pouring in through broken windows. And there'd been a multi-vehicle accident on the marginal that sent 27 critical patients to us all at once. Everyone was trying. Everyone was drowning. The first patient we lost was Senora Andrade in bed 7, 73 years old, post-stroke. She'd been stable, sleeping peacefully when the power cut. But without monitoring, we didn't see her vitals dropping until it was too late. I found her when I did my circuit of the room, pulse already gone, skin already cooling. I started compressions anyway, working her chest while shouting for help that was already helping someone else. 5 minutes, 10, 15, nothing. She was gone. Senor Peixoto in bed 3, 47, car accident victim. Internal bleeding we'd been monitoring closely, waiting for the surgical team to have an opening. Without the monitors, we didn't know he was bleeding out until he'd lost too much to bring back. I held pressure on his abdomen with my bare hands, felt his blood hot and slick between my fingers, felt his pulse flutter and fade under my palm. Another one gone. Marina Santos. 28 years old, new mother, pulmonary embolism. She was on the ventilator. She needed the machine to breathe. I bagged her manually for as long as I could, squeezing that bag in rhythm, one breath every 5 seconds. But I had to move to the next patient, had to give someone else a chance. And when I came back 12 minutes later, her lips were blue and her pupils fixed and dilated. Too late, always too late. By midnight, we'd lost 6. By 1 a.m., 9. The storm was still raging, the power was still out, and we were moving through that unit like ghosts, checking pulse after pulse, finding none, finding none, finding none. 12 patients dead in one night, 12 people who trusted us to keep them alive. 12 families who would get the worst phone call of their lives come morning. I was the senior nurse on duty, which meant it was my responsibility, my watch, my failure. The power came back at 1:43 a.m. The lights flickered on like nothing had happened. The monitors beeped back to life. The ventilators hummed. Everything working perfectly now that it was too late, now that 12 beds held bodies instead of patients. The investigation cleared us of wrongdoing. Called it an unfortunate systems failure, with no individual negligence detected. The hospital installed new generators, created new emergency protocols, made sure it would never happen again. Everyone moved on, except I couldn't. I kept showing up for work, kept doing my job, but something had broken in me that night, something I couldn't name or fix. I'd flinch at the sound of rain. My hands would shake when I had to manually bag a patient. I'd dream about Senora Andrade's face, about Marina Santos's blue lips, about the weight of all those deaths pressing down on my chest until I woke up gasping. 6 months later, I transferred to the community clinic. Told everyone I needed a change. Told myself it was about work-life balance, about spending more time with my daughter, about anything except the truth. I was terrified of being responsible for a life again. Terrified I'd fail. Terrified I'd already failed in a way that couldn't be fixed. That was 5 years ago. I've built a quiet life since then. Safe, small. I take my daughter to school. I work my shifts at the clinic. I come home. I don't talk about the hospital. I don't keep in touch with anyone from that night. I've convinced myself that this is healing. This careful distance from everything that matters. Until today. It's a Tuesday again. Of course it is. I'm at the pharmacy picking up my mother's blood pressure medication, standing in line behind maybe 7 or 8 people, half listening to the pharmacist explaining dosage instructions to an elderly man at the counter. The air conditioning is too cold. There's an awful pop song playing from a radio somewhere. My feet hurt. Completely ordinary. Completely forgettable. The man in front of me shifts his weight, and I see his face in profile. Something about the angle of his jaw, the way his ear sits slightly uneven, the small scar by his left eye. My breath catches. My vision tunnels. I know this face. I know it the way you know a song you haven't heard in years, but every word comes back the second it starts playing. Pedro Ferreira. Bed 11. He was one of the 2 that made it. I must make a sound, a gasp, a whimper, something, because he turns, looks at me, frowns slightly, that universal expression of I know you from somewhere. His eyes scan my face, searching for context. Grocery store? Gym? Some party 5 years ago? Then recognition hits him too. I watch it happen. The slight widening of his eyes, the way his mouth opens, closes, opens again. He starts, stops. You were my nurse. It's not a question. His voice is quieter than I remember from that night, when he was calling out in delirium, confused from the medications and the fever. He's older now. We both are. But his eyes are the same, that particular shade of brown that caught the emergency lights that night and looked almost amber. Yes. My voice sounds strange, distant. Pedro Ferreira, you had pneumonia, sepsis. You were in bed 11 during the storm. He's still staring at me, not accusatory, just stunned. I remember you. You kept coming back to check on me. You told me to stay with you. You said you wouldn't let the darkness take me. I did say that. I'd forgotten I said that. But now I can hear my own voice, hoarse from shouting orders, whispering to him in the dark. Stay with me, Pedro. Don't go into the dark. I need you to stay with me. I didn't think I'd ever see you again, he says, after everything, after I got transferred to another hospital once the power came back. I tried to find you, to thank you, but the hospital said you'd left. The line has moved forward. We're blocking it. People are staring. The pharmacist calls, "Next," in an irritated voice. Neither of us moves. You want to get coffee? The words come out of me before I can think them through. There's a place across the street. We could, if you have time. I'd like to... What? What do I want? To apologize? To explain? To hear him tell me he doesn't blame me? Yes, he says. Yes, I'd like that. The cafe is one of those generic chain places, too bright and too loud with bad music and the hiss of the espresso machine. We sit at a small table by the window. It's started to rain. Of course it has. Light rain. Nothing like that night. But the sound of it on the glass makes my hands shake. I wrap them around my coffee cup to hide it. I didn't know, Pedro says after a long moment. About the others. About how many... He stops. Starts again. They told me later. My wife told me. She said 12 people died that night while I was unconscious. 12 people in the same unit where I was lying. 12. The word tastes like ash in my mouth. I was there for all of them. I was the senior nurse. I was supposed to... My throat closes up. I can't finish the sentence. Supposed to what? Control the weather? Fix the generators? Be in 14 places at once? His voice is gentle. Too gentle. It makes my eyes burn. Senora Correa, I read the investigation report. My wife got a copy. We read it together. The system failed. The hospital failed. The city's infrastructure failed. You didn't fail. I should have... I try, but he cuts me off. Should have what? Worked harder? Moved faster? Chosen better? He leans forward. I was awake for some of it, you know. Not coherent, but awake. I remember the sound of you running. Back and forth. Back and forth. I remember your voice, constant, everywhere, trying to coordinate, trying to triage, trying to keep us all alive. I remember you crying while you did chest compressions on the woman in bed 7. I remember you bagging Marina Santos even when your arms had to be burning with exhaustion. I remember you fighting for us until there was nothing left to fight with. I can't look at him, can't meet his eyes, because if I do, I'll shatter. I'll come apart right here in this too bright cafe with bad pop music playing and strangers ordering frappuccinos around us. 2 of us made it, Pedro says quietly. Out of 14, in a situation where we all should have died. You know why I made it? Because you kept checking on me. Because every time I started to slip away, I'd hear your voice telling me to stay. And I did. I stayed because you needed me to. 12 people didn't. My voice breaks. 12 people needed me to save them, and I couldn't. No, he says, and there's steel in his voice now. 12 people died because the hospital's backup systems failed, because the city's electrical grid couldn't handle the storm, because we live in a broken system that prioritizes profit over redundancy, that cuts corners until corners turn into coffins. You didn't kill 12 people, Senora Correa. You saved 2, against impossible odds, in the dark, with no power and no help and no hope. You saved 2 lives that should have been lost. The tears come then, quiet, hot, running down my face faster than I can wipe them away. 5 years of holding them back, and they all come at once, here in this stupid cafe, in front of this man I barely know, but who knows the worst thing I ever lived through. I left. I whisper. I left the hospital. I couldn't go back. I was so afraid that another night like that would happen, and You were traumatized, Pedro says simply. You lived through a mass casualty event, and then kept working for 6 more months. You held it together until you couldn't anymore. That's not weakness. That's being human. I'm a nurse. I'm supposed to be stronger than that. You're a person. You're supposed to break sometimes. Everyone breaks eventually. He pauses. Can I tell you something? I nod, not trusting my voice. I broke too, he says. After I recovered physically, I was back at work. I'm an accountant, nothing dramatic, and I just couldn't function. Every time it rained, I'd have a panic attack. Every time the lights flickered, I'd freeze. I'd wake up gasping, convinced I was drowning, that the darkness was back and this time it would take me. I ended up in therapy for 18 months. Still go sometimes when things get hard. You do? Trauma doesn't care if you're a nurse or an accountant or a superhero. It gets into your bones either way. He offers a small, sad smile. But therapy helped. Talking helped. Understanding that surviving something doesn't mean you have to pretend it didn't happen. That helped most of all. We sit in silence for a while. The rain picks up outside, drumming harder against the window. I don't flinch. Not this time. What happened to the other survivor? I ask finally. The woman in bed 9. I never found out. Rafaela Gonçalves. She moved to Portugal last year. Her daughter lives there. He pulls out his phone, scrolls through something. We stayed in touch. There's a group of us, actually. Families of the people who were there that night. We get together once a year on March 14th, to remember, to support each other, to remind ourselves we survived. Even the families of the ones who, especially them. His voice is quiet but firm. Because their people deserve to be remembered. Not as statistics in a hospital report. As parents, siblings, friends, patients who trusted the system and were let down. As people whose deaths weren't senseless because they led to real change. The hospital completely overhauled their emergency systems. Every public hospital in São Paulo had to upgrade their backup power after what happened. It's not enough. It doesn't bring them back. But it means their deaths mattered. That they saved lives by dying in the most unfair way possible. Something loosens in my chest. Not relief exactly, not forgiveness, but space. Room to breathe for the first time in 5 years. You should come, Pedro says, to the next memorial, March 14th. It's at a small chapel in Jardim Paulista. Nothing formal, just people gathering to light candles and share memories. Some of the families specifically asked if anyone knew how to contact the nurses from that night. They wanted to thank you, to tell you they don't blame you, that you did everything you could. I don't know if I can... You don't have to decide now. He pulls a card from his wallet, writes something on the back. A phone number, an email. Think about it, talk to someone about it, but know that if you come, you'll be welcomed, genuinely, because we're all just people who survived something terrible, trying to find meaning in the wreckage. He stands, extends his hand. I shake it, feeling the warmth of his palm, the steadiness of his grip. Thank you. he says. For that night. For fighting for us when everything was falling apart. For not giving up even when there was every reason to. You saved my life, Señora Correa. I get to see my kids grow up because of you. I get to grow old with my wife because of you. That matters. Whether you believe it or not, that matters. He leaves. I sit alone at the table, staring at the card in my hand, watching the rain slide down the window glass. That night, I dream about the storm. But this time, when I'm running through the dark unit, checking pulse after pulse, I'm not alone. There are other people there. Families. Survivors. The woman from bed 7, Señora Andrade, is sitting up in bed, smiling, telling me it's okay, I did my best. Marina Santos is holding her baby, saying thank you for trying. All 12 of them, gathered in that dark room, not accusing, not blaming. Just there. Witnessing. Releasing me from a debt I didn't owe. I wake up before dawn. The apartment is quiet. My daughter is still asleep in her room. I make coffee and sit at the kitchen table, pulling out my laptop. I start writing. Not for anyone else. For myself. Every detail I can remember from that night. Every choice I made. Every patient I lost. Every moment I blamed myself. By the time the sun comes up, I've written 15 pages. It's not enough. It might never be enough. But it's a start. Over the next 3 months, I do something I should have done 5 years ago. I get help. I find a therapist who specializes in medical trauma. I join a support group for healthcare workers dealing with PTSD. I stop pretending I'm fine and start learning what actual healing looks like. It's hard. Some days are harder than others. There are sessions where I sob so hard I can't breathe, where I have to describe in detail every single patient I lost, every decision I second-guessed, every moment I wanted to give up. My therapist asks me questions I don't want to answer, makes me sit with feelings I've been running from, forces me to confront the simple, terrible truth that I'm human, that I have limits, that being unable to save everyone doesn't make me a failure. I start having lunch with my old colleagues from the hospital. They tell me they miss me, that the unit isn't the same without me, that there's always a position open if I want to come back. I tell them maybe someday, but not yet. I'm not ready yet. March 14th arrives, 5 years and 1 day since the storm. I drive to the chapel in Jardín Paulista, wearing black, carrying 12 white roses. My hands are shaking. My heart is racing. I almost turn around 3 times, but I don't. I park. I walk inside. The chapel is small and simple, wood pews and plain white walls. Maybe 30 people are scattered throughout, talking in hushed voices. Pedro sees me immediately, waves me over. He's standing with a woman I assume is his wife and 2 teenagers who have his eyes. "You came," he says, and his smile is genuine. I almost didn't. Almost doesn't count. He turns to the others. "Everyone, this is Helena Correa. She was one of the nurses there that night." I brace myself for anger. For blame. For someone to finally say what I've been thinking for 5 years. Where were you when my mother was dying? Why didn't you save my husband? How could you let this happen? Instead, a woman in her 60s approaches me. Her eyes are red-rimmed, but she's smiling. "You took care of my sister, Maria Andrade. She was in bed 7. My breath catches. "Señora Andrade, yes, I'm so sorry. I tried." "I know you did." She takes my hand in both of hers. "Maria's daughters told me what the investigators said, that you were doing chest compressions on her for nearly 15 minutes, that you didn't give up even when it was clear, that you cried while you fought for her." Her voice breaks. "Thank you for not letting her die alone in the dark. Thank you for caring. That means more than you know." One by one, they come to me. Families of the 12. Some angry, yes, at the hospital, at the system, at the injustice of losing someone they loved. But not at me, never at me. They tell me stories about their people, show me photos, ask me what I remember, and I tell them, every detail I can recall, who their loved one was in that unit, what I tried to do, how I held their hand, how I told them they weren't alone. It breaks me open, again, differently this time. Not the clean break of trauma, but the messy crack of actually grieving, actually feeling, actually letting go of the guilt that's been crushing my lungs for 5 years. When it's time for the service, we gather around a small altar. 12 candles, 12 names read aloud. 12 lives honored and remembered. When they call for the nurses to light the candles, I'm not the only one who steps forward. 3 other nurses from that night have come. We haven't spoken in years. We light the candles together, hands trembling, tears falling, but standing. Still here, still trying. After the service, we stay. Drinking coffee in the church hall, sharing stories, laughing at good memories, crying at the unfairness of it all. Pedro introduces me to Rafaela Gonçalves, the other survivor, now 70 years old and fierce as fire. She hugs me so tight I can't breathe and says, "I've been waiting 5 years to thank you properly, you stubborn woman. You saved my life. I was just doing my job. You were doing the impossible." She holds me at arm's length, looking me dead in the eye. "And you succeeded twice. That's 2 more victories than anyone had a right to expect. Be proud of that." Proud. It's such a strange word. I've spent 5 years drowning in shame, in guilt, in the weight of 12 deaths. The idea that I could be proud of anything from that night feels impossible. But looking around this room, seeing these families, these survivors, this community built on shared tragedy and hard-won resilience, I think maybe Rafaela is right. Maybe saving 2 people out of 14 in an impossible situation is something to be proud of. Maybe trying, even when failing, is enough. Maybe I don't have to carry the weight of those 12 deaths alone. Before I leave, Pedro pulls me aside. "What you did today, showing up, that took courage. Real courage. Not the dramatic kind from movies. The quiet, hard kind that means doing the thing you're terrified of because it's right." I'm still terrified, I admit. Good. Fear means you're alive, means you still care. He pauses. "There's something else. A few of us have been talking. The families, some survivors, a couple of former nurses. We want to create a support network for healthcare workers who've been through traumatic situations. Peer counseling, support groups, advocacy for better hospital safety standards. We want to turn what happened into something that actually helps people, prevents this from happening again." That sounds ambitious. It is, but we need people who've been there, who understand, who can speak to what it's actually like. He looks at me carefully. "We need you, if you're willing. Not to lead it, there are professionals for that, but to be part of it, to share your story, to help other nurses know they're not alone when the worst happens." I think about it, about all those months after the storm when I felt so isolated, so sure that what I was feeling was weakness, failure, proof that I wasn't cut out for this work. About how different it might have been if I'd had someone to talk to who understood, who'd been there. "I'll think about it," I say. Then, more honestly, "Actually, yes, I'll do it. I want to do it." His smile could light up the whole room. "Thank you. Seriously. This is going to help so many people." I drive home as the sun is setting, 12 white roses now arranged in a vase on my passenger seat. I'm exhausted, emotionally wrung out. But something feels different. Lighter. Like I've been carrying a piano on my back for 5 years and someone finally helped me set it down. My daughter is in the kitchen when I get home, doing homework at the table. She looks up when I walk in, takes in my tear-stained face, the roses, The way I'm moving like I just ran a marathon. You okay, Mai? Yeah, I say, and I mean it. Yeah, I think I finally am. That night, I send an email to my former supervisor at the hospital. Ask if that position is still open. Say I'm not ready yet, but maybe in 6 months, with some conditions. Part-time hours, regular therapy as part of my contract, training in trauma response, support for when things get hard. She responds within an hour. We've been waiting for you to be ready. Whatever you need, we'll make it work. Welcome back. 6 months later, I walk back into the hospital for the first time in 5 years. The unit has been renovated. New equipment, new emergency systems, backup generators that could power a small city, protocols and training and redundancies built on the lessons of that terrible March night. I'm only working 3 shifts a week, giving myself space to heal, to process, to not burn out again. I've joined the support network Pedro mentioned. We meet twice a month, healthcare workers and survivors and families, talking about what trauma does to us, how to carry it without letting it crush us, how to keep caring without letting caring destroy us. It's not easy. Some nights I still dream about the storm. Some shifts I still panic when the lights flicker. But I have tools now. I have support. I have a community of people who understand that you can be broken and still be whole, that you can fail and still be enough, that you can lose 12 people and save 2. And both of those truths can exist at the same time. On March 14th, 6 years after the storm, we hold our memorial service again. This time, I light the candles without shaking. This time, when the families thank me, I can receive it without drowning in guilt. This time, when they ask me to speak, I stand in front of them and tell them the truth. For 5 years, I blame myself for that night, I say. I counted 12 deaths like they were marks against my soul. I left nursing because I couldn't face the possibility of failing again. I built my life around staying safe, staying small, never risking, never trying. I look around the room. Pedro and Rafaela in the front row, both nodding encouragement. The families scattered throughout, listening. My daughter sitting in the back, proud of her mother for finally facing this. But here's what I learned, I continue. Those 12 deaths weren't my fault. They were the result of system failures, of infrastructure collapse, of impossible choices in an impossible situation. And those 2 survivors, Pedro and Rafaela, they're alive because we fought, because 4 nurses in the dark with no power and no help refused to give up. We tried, we fought, we saved who we could, and that has to be enough. My voice breaks, but I push through. I'm a nurse again. I'm back in the ICU 3 nights a week, taking care of people, because I realized that walking away, staying safe, refusing to risk, that meant those 12 deaths won. That meant letting fear win. And I refuse. I refuse to let that night define me as anything less than what I am. Someone who fights for people even when the odds are impossible. Someone who stays when everything says to run. Someone who believes that 2 lives saved matters just as much as 12 lives lost. The applause is quiet, but genuine. Afterward, new families approach me. People who've lost loved ones in other medical tragedies. Healthcare workers dealing with their own trauma. All of us broken in different ways. All of us trying to find meaning in the wreckage. This is my life now. Nurse 3 days a week. Support group facilitator 2 evenings a month. Mother every day. Person who survived trauma and learned to live with it rather than run from it. It's not the life I planned. It's messier, harder, more honest than anything I imagined. But it's mine, and it's enough. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever struggled with guilt, with trauma, with feeling like you failed when you were doing your best in an impossible situation, I want you to know something. You're not alone. There are millions of us out there, carrying our own versions of that dark night, our own impossible choices, our own weight of what we couldn't save. But we're still here, still trying, still believing that fighting matters even when we don't win. And that has to count for something. That has to be enough. Please subscribe to this channel to hear more stories like this one, real accounts of people facing impossible odds and finding their way through. Because we all need to know we're not alone in the dark. That someone else has walked this path and made it through. That healing is possible, even when it feels impossible. That you can be broken and still be whole. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of survivors, fighters, and people who refuse to let trauma have the last word. Because your story matters, your struggle matters, and you deserve to know that you're not alone.